I've always approached sales in a different way that I don't think sales should ever be force fed. I think all sales should be educational. So I think
Mhm.
if you educate the customer. So here at Magazine Jukebox, what we do is we actually start off with a discovery call. The goal of that discovery call is to find out where are their pain points at your
Yep.
facility, at the hospital, where are some of your pain points? Staffing issues, perceived time, there's all kinds of different issues.
Yeah.
So we identify the issues, we identify who the decision makers are, and then we set up a demo to demo it, and we curtail that demo specifically for them.
Today we have Scott Janney on the pod. Scott is the CEO and co-founder of Magazine Jukebox, a venture-backed startup in Norfolk, Virginia, that has built an online entertainment platform. Think digital magazines, games, and trivia that enhances the customer experience wherever there are waiting areas like at healthcare facilities, hair salons, and automotive service centers. Scott is a 10th grade dropout turned successful entrepreneur. And today we're going to talk to Scott about his go to market strategy with Magazine Jukebox, his approach to sales, and his experiences building a sales team from scratch. So let's get ready for episode 22 of the Systematic Selling Podcast. Scott, welcome to the pod.
Hey, thanks everyone. Thank you for bringing me on the show. It's excited to be here and share our story. It's always fun.
Awesome. Well, anything you'd like to add or clarify with that intro? Like if I butchered your name or butchered your city, you tell me what I.
Yeah, well, you actually did really good with the city. So anybody who lives here in Norfolk knows that it's Norfolk, but most people pronounce it Norfolk and who don't live in the city. So it's always funny because, Norfolk is the largest Navy base in the world, and we're surrounded by bases, other bases, Air Force, Army, you name it. And it's always fun seeing the new recruits come in and they come to the store, run into one of them. They're like, yeah, this is Norfolk. And they're like, yeah, all right, you're not from here. We can tell. But we can also tell by their haircuts and how they walk and how they group together. So we get that. We love our military. We appreciate them. Wouldn't be here without them. So, and we're praying for them because this world is kind of wild right now. But I will tell you, in regards to my last name, this is going to go down in infamy. So, because I the funny story about my last name is Janae is correct, but
Yeah.
Janney would have also been correct. And
Oh,
here's what I mean by that. So all my life growing up, it was Janae. My mom called us, Janae brothers, me and my brother. My dad, you know, we'd be the Janaes. That's what it was. And unfortunately, 13 years ago, my father got diagnosed with cancer and he ended up losing that battle. And so, but he wanted to go back to his hometown, a town called Ottumwa, Iowa, and wanted to see some old friends, last hurrah. And he asked me if I would take him. So I said, sure.
wow.
So I took him and all of them, not one, not two, but all of them were like, "Oh, it's so good to see the Janney brothers back in town." And I was like, I kept hearing it over and over again. And I finally said to my dad, I was like, "Hey, it's like you got to talk to me about this. Like they're all calling you the Janney brothers. My uncle was there, and I was like, why are they calling? Like, what's going on with this story?" And my dad goes, "Oh yeah, I'm surprised I never told you." He was like, "When I joined the Navy," he goes, "I didn't like Janny, so I changed it myself to Janae." And I was like,
Wow.
a little bit of information. Now it didn't change the spelling; he just changed how it sounded. And so
Yeah.
that was, and so it was, yeah. I was like, so I was 28 years old at the time when he passed, and I was like, 28 years. You could have told us this, and you chose not to. So thanks for allowing me to spend. I would probably calculate that I spent at least a week of my life correcting people, saying
Yeah.
from Janny to Janae, and now all that I could have recouped a week of my life, I'm sure. So
100%. You'll never get that back.
never get it back.
And
Never get it back.
and so
But
you stuck with the fake pronunciation then.
I'm so used to it. So at this point, but now, and it's funny, like my wife, for example, like she prefers to go by Janae. She doesn't want
Yeah.
to go by Janie. I mean, people will call her Janie, but it's, yeah, it's Janae. And that's just how we just kept going with it. So can't,
Yeah, it's kind of
can't
like the
knock it
way
now.
we used to call Target Target. I mean, it adds
Yeah.
adds a
think they,
little bit to
I
it.
think they still call it that. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. I haven't been in a Target in
Oh,
forever.
I haven't either. I mean, you got Amazon. I mean, what the heck?
And yeah, who are you telling? Well, you know what though? I just found out like Sam's Club delivers. I was like, I'm gonna order groceries in bulk. I was
Yeah.
like, this is great. So we didn't know that. You know how many times I've been to Sam's Club we have my wife and I, we have three kids,
Yeah.
and it's like for me, it's, they're just. Do you remember the TGIF, like the Friday nights TGIF, and they had a
Yeah.
show called Dinosaurs? Do you remember
Oh
that?
my gosh. Yeah,
Remember
I do.
the baby gotta love me? And then you had the garbage disposal was a dinosaur that sat underneath the sink and was just there to eat all the
Oh,
scraps. That's how my
yes.
kids are. My kids are that garbage disposal. They just eat everything.
Now, how old are they, boys and girl?
Yeah.
Boys.
Yeah, so it's boy, girl, boy. And so
Okay.
my oldest, he is 8, my middle is
Okay.
6, and so my daughter's 6, and then my youngest son is soon to be 3.
Okay. So
So,
you got a
so
nice little age spread there.
yeah, yeah, it's fun. Man, I'm very fortunate and blessed. God has given me an amazing wife and amazing kids, and I have zero complaints.
Oh,
Been very fortunate.
that's great. Now, you're based in Norfolk,
Yep.
but where did you grow up? Did you grow up there or?
No, no, no. I'm from the West Coast, so I'm actually right outside of Burbank, and Hollywood is a town called Sun Valley, California, and that's where I was, you know, born and relatively raised.
Yeah.
I'm a government brat, so I moved around quite a bit, and part of that moving around was I've lived in Texas, I've lived in Iowa, I've lived in Tennessee, I've lived in Illinois, I've lived, gosh, I mean, it's like where have I not lived? I mean, it's I've been
Yeah.
I've lived in Ohio. I've been so fortunate to be able to move around like that, and I still have some of the greatest friends from elementary school that I still keep in contact with, and yeah, so but home to me has always been Sun Valley, and
Mhm.
it's interesting though because I've definitely been here in Norfolk. I've been here longer now
Yeah.
than my younger half. So now it's like, well, what is, this is home. Do I refer to California as, there's got to be a word for that. Like you can't be home anymore. Like because how, like I would not go back to California. No, I'm not trying to get political here, but I love money and
Understood. Yeah.
I don't want to lose it. So I choose not to go to California. So
Yeah.
but it's like, and I shouldn't say I love money. I like my money. I don't love money.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah, California's just a different world. I have actually on my arm here is all tattooed. It has California and Virginia
Yeah.
coming across.
Oh well.
And I want to I told my wife I'm going to get a new tattoo added to this one. It's going to say CA for California, and it's going to say circa 1980, 1990. I don't want to claim any of the 2000s. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
seem right.
Yeah. I have no idea what you would call it because I was born in Houston, but I lived 7 years in Honolulu, Hawaii, and then moved from there to Fort Lauderdale. I was there for 5.5 years till I graduated college. And up until that point, I would have called Fort Lauderdale home. I mean, because
Yeah.
it's that formative years, and then met my wife in college in Birmingham, Alabama. We lived in Atlanta for a while, and then came back down to Florida, and we've been living in Orlando now for 12 years. It's the most I've lived in any single spot, but I would not call it my home like I would say Fort Lauderdale. And the second longest place I lived in was Honolulu, Hawaii. I wouldn't call it home. So it's
Yeah.
I have no idea what you would call it if you've
There's got
been
to be a
sort of
name.
like a
We got to create a name or something's got to be said because it's confusing. It's
it
confusing.
is. It's where and you can't say it's where I'm domiciled. I mean, I'm
But
domiciled in Orlando,
I
so but So
Domicile would be a really tough word to keep repeating.
it would be. It's a little too formal. Now, you moved around a ton, and
Yep.
then 10th grade, you decided to, hey, I'm done with school. Walk me through what happened up to that point that made you say, you know what, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And where did you go from there?
So I wish I could say it was a aha moment. Like it was like I'm done, pound sand. See it wasn't like that at all. It wasn't part of my plan. It wasn't I didn't have some crystal ball thinking like, that hey, I was just going to, figure things out or somehow miraculously get a high school diploma somehow. I remember actually I totally forgot. I actually looked up where I could get like an authentic high school diploma and not have to go to school. And it was like there was this play. It was like, but the whole thing is like it's got to be back checked, like fact checked. Like, is that even a school? Like, and
Yeah.
it said that like it checked off all these boxes that it would come back as authentic and all this. And I was ready to pull a trigger on that, but I never did. So
Yeah.
now all I can hope for is an honorary degree somewhere. So it's funny if I ever get an honorary degree somewhere, then I'm going to tell them, say, well, in order for me to get that, you're going to have to give me an
A
honorary
GED.
GED. Yeah. So we'll see if that happens. But
Yeah.
no, so how the story goes is by time I was in 10th grade, I was in probably three or four different middle schools and about three different high schools. And
Mhm.
so I moved around a lot. My dad, I love my dad. He passed away 13 years ago, but my dad chased money. And so
Mhm.
he was a GS employee. And whenever an opportunity came up that paid more, he would go. And he
Gotcha.
never really thought about the fallout that that would have on us kids. And mainly me, because my brother ended up staying. So my parents divorced when I was 6. They stayed connected and cordial, but yeah, I chose to live with my father. My brother chose to live with my mom, which was good because we weren't really like my brother and I are super close now. We talk almost every day, which is
Yeah.
awesome. But we weren't that close back in those
How many
days.
years
Actually, in
apart?
fact, or a year and a half apart, but
Yeah.
we just really didn't like each other. I chose very much a different path in life
Mhm.
and although he likes to brag that he at least got a high school diploma and I didn't, but but so yeah, so I chose to live with my dad and by that time I remember I went into 10th grade and I'm a social guy, so I knew a lot of
Yeah.
people there and I was really just going to see my friends. Like I didn't care. At that point, I was so far behind in school, and a counselor actually pulled me in and they're like, "Hey, look, you're going to have to, you're going to be a super senior and you're going to have to go to summer school at least 2 or 3 summers."
Wow.
And I was like, well, that sounds about as depressing as it can get. And so this is, I was 16 years old, so I was allowed to drop out. I didn't have to have permission to drop out, which
That's
I
true.
don't know if those rules are still in effect. And if they are kids, you didn't hear that, children listening to this. But so you didn't have to you didn't have to get permission to drop out. So I just dropped out. I didn't even tell anybody. I just stopped showing up.
What about
And
your dad? Did you tell your
I didn't,
dad?
nope, did not tell my dad. I didn't
Yeah.
tell my mom. I didn't tell anybody. I
Yeah.
told nobody. Like
Wow.
nobody knew that I dropped out. Most people just assumed that I got transferred to another school or that I
Yeah.
moved or something.
Yeah.
And then actually so what I ended up doing is I ended up going, like, I knew right away that I had to do something with my day. I didn't have any money
Mhm.
and I couldn't ask my dad for money every day because he would catch on. And so I was like, I had to do something. So I found a place to work. And so I started working at a restaurant and I worked my tail off and I was making ridiculous amount of money for a 16-year-old. I was probably like 800 a week. And
Yeah.
so it was like at that time. And so, I'm going back, I'm 41, so 23
Yeah.
years ago. And so, 3,200 bucks a month is a lot of money back then,
Yeah.
and on top of that, it was mainly cash. So it was like it was gravy. So it wasn't until like 6 months later, I come walking through the door, and I remember it was like 7 o'clock at night. So I'm walking through the door, and there's my dad. And my dad, I could tell, I knew, like, my dad's signs, like, like,
Yeah.
crap, I messed up. Something, I
Yeah.
did something.
The jig is up.
And yeah. And so my dad looks at me, he goes, I need you to sit down. And I was like, okay. And he goes, because if you stay standing up, I may be forced to beat the crap out of you. And I was like, all right, here we go. What did I do? And
Yeah.
and so then he goes, I want you to listen to this. Hits the answer machine. For those who don't know what that is, it's like voicemail. And hits the answer machine, and it's like, blah blah blah. This is the counselor for, at the time it was Kempsville High School. It's like, this is a counselor for Kempsville High School, and we're at the end of the season, or at the end of the school year, and Scott needs to come collect his things. We had to break into his locker to get his things out. And so my dad, so when I said, oh, I just kind of like played off of like, oh, that's weird. I didn't know they were opening. Like I had to clear it out today. Like I was just like trying to play this off. And my dad says, he goes, well, I called them and asked them why they broke into your locker, and come to find out that you haven't been to school in about 6 months.
Wow.
And he's like, you need to explain yourself right now. Where have you been? And so I told him, I was like, Dad, I was too far behind. I wasn't going to succeed, and school is now in my way. And so
Wow.
it was so heated, I had to move, like literally move out that moment.
Mm.
Like I had to leave the house. And I didn't come back for a couple of weeks. And
Where'd you go?
I
Okay.
stayed at a buddy's house,
Yeah.
and his parents found out. And I'm sure his mom or dad was, well, no, actually I know that they weren't, because his parents were like completely disconnected in life, and he was an adult. So he was 19, so he didn't have to, so his parents just assumed that I was 19, just crashing at the house.
Gotcha.
And my dad called me a couple weeks later, because he needed that. I needed it, but he needed it more. And he said, can would you consider coming home and let's talk? And so I said, okay. So I went home, and we talked, and it was heated, but it was controlled.
Yeah.
And he just ends up, I remember his like last words at the end of this whole thing. He looked at me and he just says, so what's the plan? If this is what you're gonna do, then what's the plan? He said, because I've got to support you now. Like I got to support your decision, not support you. And he found out how much money I was making, and I had to start paying rent. It's like all these things,
Yeah.
the free ride was over. But yeah, so I mean, and then my dad became one of my biggest supporters. I did attempt to join the Navy during 9/11,
Yeah.
and I couldn't pass my hearing test.
Mm.
And so that was a bummer, because they had a GED program that you can join the Navy, and then they would put you through this fast track GED program.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a plan, but I didn't get it. And so I remember I ended up applying for a Christmas job, or seasonal job at Radio Shack. And apparently they don't check high school diplomas. And
Hey
so
kids, Radio
yeah,
Shack was a place where you bought
uh,
electronics back in the day.
it was the coolest place in the
It
world.
was.
Like it was, I mean, I still wish they would bring it back.
Oh,
But yeah, so Radio Shack hires me seasonal hire, and man, I now know I am designed for sales. I
yeah.
crushed it. I just crushed it. I was the number one salesperson. I remember Henry Pitzer was my manager, and I looked at him. I said, "Hey, do you think I'll be able to stay, you
Yeah.
know, after the season?" And he's like, "Yeah." He said, a lot of time, or he goes, "Oftentimes, if you're a good performer," he says, "we'll offer you a job." I was like, okay, great. And I said, and because I happen to be out of this mall, which is called Lynn Haven Mall here, one of the most booming mall. Like that was, if you were going to get Radio Shack, that's where you wanted to be. Like every other store did maybe 800,000 to 1.2 million in a year.
Yeah.
Lynn Haven was doing like 3 million a year. Like it was not
Wow.
even not even close. Like that's where you wanted to be.
Oh,
And
now
so,
is this in Virginia at the time,
yep,
or
all
is
in
this
Virginia.
okay?
Yeah. So I've been in Virginia since I was 16. So,
Got it. Okay.
and so so the season ended and
Hmm.
the roster came out, and I get a text message because I wasn't at the store when it came out. I get a text message from Buddy, and he's like, "You suck." And I was like, "Why?" And he goes, "You got Lynn Haven. They're keeping you
Wow,
there." And I was
that's
like, and
awesome.
so to put that in like some perspective, as an 18-year-old, I was making about 50,000 a year. And
Yeah,
so again, going back 20 years ago,
that's
as an
good
18
money.
year old, I mean, it was crazy. That's like in today's dollars, probably a buck 25.
Hmm.
And so I stayed on and then I went to the MIT program. They
Yeah,
gave me a store. I was like, holy smokes, I'm 19. I just turned 19 and they gave me a $1.2 million store to manage and run on my own. So now I went from 50,000 like 75,000 a year.
yeah,
And with the opportunity to make 100,000 a year. Like I was living the life.
yeah.
And then my stinking friend decided to come and talk to me and said, "Hey, you're really good at this, and
Mm.
I'm really good at building. What if we branch out?" And I think it was more me like enticing him, saying, "I can do the sales, you do the building, and let's
Yeah,
let's do our own business." We did. Epic fail.
yeah.
We like lost. I mean, even lost a friendship over the deal, which sunk because
What type of
you
business was it?
construction. So we built
Okay.
garages, sheds, screen enclosures, and he was
Yeah.
so talented, so unbelievably talented. His name was Mike, and he was my best friend. Like he was my
Mhm.
absolute best friend. We did everything together.
Yeah.
And I made some mistakes and I mismanaged funds a little bit, and nothing was ill-willed or nothing was bad intentions, but
Yeah.
I got myself comfortable to a certain amount of money, and I was just trying to keep that alive and
Hmm.
not having a bit of clue of how hard it is to run a business. No
Yeah.
clue. I had no idea. But I knew that I always knew that I was going to be an entrepreneur. So to go reverse, when I was 13 years old, my dad bought the rights to this razor thing. And I remember like seeing like I come home one day from school and there's like a bazillion boxes in our two-bedroom apartment. I mean, it must have been like 500 boxes.
Yeah.
And inside each box was like 100 of these razors. And
Wow.
I was like, what the heck is this? And he's like, well, I bought the rights to these for this area. And, I'm going to, but then they just sat there. They sat there. They sat there. And I finally told my dad, I was like, Dad, you got to sell these. They're doing you
Yeah.
no good. And he's like, well, I got to do something online. And keep in mind, he wouldn't be a full-time entrepreneur because he was making such good money in the government that in security and he was happy. So I asked him, I said, "Hey, can I take some of these and go try to sell them myself?" And my dad was like, "Sure." So, this is back when you can ride a bike somewhere and not feel it's not safe. So
Yeah.
I took my bike and we were living in Alameda, California, which is right outside of San Francisco. And I remember I went to a Walgreens and I just happened to be there at the moment that not only the manager was there, but like the regional manager and then the
Wow.
regional vice president was there. And I asked to see if they'd be interested in buying this product. And I don't remember what I said. I didn't have a tagline or anything. I just
Yeah.
said, my dad owns the rights to these and I want to see if I can sell them. And so the guy looked at him, the manager, and he's like, "Yeah, I like these. These would be good, like right here at the cash register. Like I like this
Hmm.
concept." And the regional manager, and they said, "All right, well, go get your dad because we can't get into contract with you." And they had discretionary power to buy local stuff at that time for Walgreens. And so they ended up buying like 3,000 units, I think, from my dad.
Yeah.
But then my dad just sat on it again. But that put that bug
Bug in
in
you.
me. And you
Yeah.
got to also to understand a little bit of history. This is probably going to blow your mind a little bit. I don't share the story enough, but it's still really cool.
Yeah.
And I have no rights to it, just for the record. I have no rights. I get no royalties on this, so nobody come knocking on my door. But my grandfather, he was my step grandfather, but we all knew him as Papa because he was always around.
Yeah.
And his name was Edward Tyler. So my middle name is Tyler, and his name was Edward Tyler. And if you look up Edward Tyler, in 1979, he invented a thing called the electric command start. And every time you start your car with a key fob, now you know the grandson of who invented that product.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so I've kind of always had this in me that I wanted to be a
Yeah.
business owner and I wanted to own companies. And so now I had my first epic fail. And then I was like, all right, then I
Yeah.
went and worked for a pest control company. And I was like, hey, I could do this myself and sell these things. And I hate bugs and rodents, but it was good money and it was resist like it was, depression or recession proof. There you go, recession proof.
Yep.
And so I branched out on my own. I ended up selling that company, did okay. Then I created a .com with a partner that was stupid, but did it.
What year
Ended
was
up,
that?
oh geez, I don't know about year. I usually go by age. So I was 23, 23, 20, no,
Okay.
25, 25,
Okay.
25.
So
And so,
mid 2000s.
yep. And so created a .com called needlocalhelp.com. That ended up getting bought out by Google, which was pretty incredible, but not
Awesome.
a lot of money there. It sounds
Okay.
cool. It's more prestigious than it is money because
Yeah.
it's basically like, here's a check, and if you don't accept it, we are going to just duplicate what you did. So
Yeah. You take
those are
it.
your choices. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll take
Yeah.
it. And so by the time you split with the partner and taxes and everything, I got nothing. And so then we did, let's see, then I ended up going into what did I do after that? Then I went into insurance, and
Yeah.
so I worked at Geico. I knew that I loved insurance, but I hated telephones, being on the phones all the
Yeah.
time. So then I ended up going working for a company called Farm Bureau. Worked for them for about 3 years, and then there was an opportunity to open up my own branch. And so back in
Nice.
2013, I opened up my first insurance agency, and to this day, my wife and I we still own two of them, and they run on their own. We have a great team over there. I haven't stepped foot in them in years, and my
Yeah.
wife
And you're
does.
just basically earning money off those renewals,
Yeah,
right? Is
yeah,
that how that
exactly. I
works?
mean,
Yeah.
so we went from scratch to zero clients to, a little over like 4 or 5 thousand clients. And when
Very
you're
well
at that
done.
and our retention is like 90% or 85% retention. So it's like, as long as you can continue to grow the 15% or stay even keel on that 15%, you can continue. And then, premiums go up. So my commission goes up. Like it's just kind of how
Right.
that
Right.
works.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we have those, but we do have light at the end of the tunnel on those things. Our goal is to sell them. It's just not a good season to sell them, but
Yeah.
we definitely see a future. Like it's not something that we're passionate about. And then fast forward to early 2000, well, early 2020, right before COVID. My
Yeah.
wife and I, we were talking about opening up, like we've been talking about opening up a coffee shop. And I wanted to open up a coffee shop with this magazine wall.
Yeah.
And so we kept talking about it, and then we finally put money down on a lease, and COVID hits. And so that everything just went
Yeah.
south from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we knew that we couldn't use discretionary funds to start another company when our staff was going to be nervous about their own jobs. And
Yeah.
we just couldn't justify that. So and I just recently heard this analogy, and I love this analogy. There's two different types of people in this world. There's those who are going to make it to the top, turn around and look and see who they brought with them.
Yeah.
And then there's the other one who's going to turn around and look at all the dead bodies that they had to kill off in order to get there. My
Yeah.
wife and I have always been, we want to see how many people we brought with us. We just
Yeah.
don't believe in that philosophy of hurting other people to get to the top. And so about 4 months went by, and I was in the kitchen, and my wife said, hey, there's too bad you can't. Or she said to me like, hey, coffee shops have figured it out. And I always like to joke. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, coffee is like legalized cocaine here in America. So
It
they,
is.
and so as you're sipping your coffee, I think,
I'm a
so
consumer. Yeah. I'm
yeah,
an
yeah,
addict.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Welcome to AA. So yeah,
Yeah.
so should it be CC like for coffee? No, C. I don't. Anyways, okay. So they. So
I'm not giving it up, by the way. So
yeah, yeah, no, I understand. I understand. I'm not just what is that? What was that old commercial? It was like I'm not just a I'm not just the CEO. I'm also
the
a
client.
user. Yeah, a client.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
that's right.
was it the
The
Remington
hair.
or Gillette? Yeah, or
Yeah, it
Hair
was like
Club
the
for
hair
Men.
hair club for men. That's it. Yeah, yeah,
That's it.
that's right. So my wife was like coffee shop figured out, and I was like being this little whiny baby, and I was just like,
Yeah.
yeah, but but I can't have my magazine wall. Like magazines were gone. Like, and they still to this day, like certain areas they can't bring magazines back. Like in hospitals, medical facilities,
Yeah.
there's like some that allow it, some don't, depending on what, how big their facility is. And well, anyways, so I looked at her and I said, it's too bad you can't just scan a code and enjoy a magazine without having to give all your personal information and download another app, because the last thing we need is another app on our phone.
Yeah.
And my wife looked at me and she says, well, why isn't there? And I was like, that's carnal sin to an entrepreneur. And so I started doing a bunch of R&D and
Yeah.
trying to figure it out. And 8 months later, I had an MVP, and a year and a half or a year later after that, we went live with our product, and we
Real,
went
real,
live in
real
Jan.
quick, let
Yep,
me define MVP,
sure.
minimum viable product. Is that correct?
Yep, super, super important. If you're thinking about
Yeah.
starting a company, any of your listeners, viewers, if you're thinking about starting a company, you always start with an MVP, because you have to find out if there is a product market fit.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you spend all this money and time on a thought, right?
Yep.
And you don't know if people are going to buy it. You have no idea. So one of the hacks that I did was I created the MVP, and then I wrote up a letter of intent, which was also accompanied by an NDA. And so the letter of intent basically said, if I can deliver this, as you see
Mhm.
this MVP, in a more robust way, but like this is the concept. If I can deliver this, would you as a business owner buy this?
Yeah.
And if they said yes, then I asked them if they would sign a letter of intent, and it would be for roughly, you know, for like $120 or something like that, something silly.
Yeah.
And for the year, like I was just like giving away. I just wanted to find
Yeah.
out. So I went to 20 different verticals or different businesses, and 19 of 20 of them said yes.
Well done.
And
Yeah.
so I said, okay, I got an MVP,
Mhm.
I've got product market fit. And I was like, so I started going back to the numbers. What is this going to be? What is this going to cost to launch this thing, to even get this thing into fruition? And yeah, I figured it was going to be above what I was willing to pay to open up a coffee shop. So I knew that I would have to raise capital.
Yeah.
So I started opening up, raising capital. We use a convertible note. We have, venture capitalists that have come on board. We have angel investors. And so we successfully raised $2.7 million to get it off the ground.
Nice.
And that doesn't include the $300,000 of my own cash that's in it,
Mhm.
and the 3 years of no pay,
Yeah.
doing this with no pay. And
Yeah.
so that was very, very difficult. It was very stressful. Yes, we had our agencies, which I always encourage anybody who's creating a business or starting a business. If you can figure out how to maintain some kind of cash flow because you have to eat, I'm all
Yeah.
for going all in. It's tattooed on my leg where it says, sink the ship. Like if you're going to go for it, you've got to sink the ship. But at the same time, you got to be smart. And at the time when I launched this, I had two children. I didn't
Yeah.
have three, and now I
Yeah.
have three. And when we first started our insurance companies, we had zero kids, and it wasn't until a few years later we had our first child. So it was. I don't want to say it was everything was strategic. We didn't plan
Yeah.
when we were going to have a baby per se, but we also knew what we needed to do to try to not have a baby right away. So it
Let me hit the
was,
pause
yeah,
button real
yeah, go
quick
for it.
on that point. I want to reinforce what you said to our audience. What Scott is talking about there in terms of, let's say you're in sales right now and you're thinking about starting your own business. It is important to think about where you'll have revenue during this time that you're doing it. The big mistake I made as a first time entrepreneur back in my 20s with a wife, two young daughters was I went all in and cut off all other forms of income. So I went, it was a 3 year, we had the dot com startup, raised money, all that good stuff. I did not take a salary. I drained whatever little retirement savings we had. I maxed out credit cards and everything else, and it created a ton of pressure. But more importantly, what it did is it cut off my ability to sustain. So by the
Mm.
end of that 3 year period, I could not continue.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I was able to get back on my feet through, sales career and everything else until I could reemerge as an entrepreneur. But it's super important. If I had to go back in time, if I were to make any adjustments, I would have maintained some income streams and do the business. And
Yeah.
at the time, I thought I needed to prove to my investors I was all in. But the problem with that is you go all in without any other sorts of income, you have no sustainability power. And ultimately, that's not great for the investors, your customers, your family, or anybody else. So
Right.
I throw it back to you, Scott. What you gave there was fantastic advice and a great model.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you sharing that because I'm such an advocate for founders that they need to eat. Like you
Yeah.
gotta eat. Like you
Yep.
can't. This whole all-in model, lack of better words, and I say this, and so feel free to bleep me out, but it really pisses me off.
No,
It really pisses me off when I hear like investors say like, are you all in? You've got to go, you got to be broke. I want to see maxed out credit cards. I want to see this and that. I want, the power of broke. And I mean, there's so many books out there, and I'm not trying to call them out, but Sean John or John what on Shark
it's
Tank,
Damon John.
Damon John, yeah.
Yep.
Like that was his whole platform is like the power of broke and going being broke, and like I get it. Like, don't get me wrong. Like Lauren and I, through these last 4 years, we've gone down to being broke. But that was a
It wasn't
calculated.
intentional.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a calculated broke. And
Right.
we've recouped. We've
Yeah.
rebounded. But man, it's one of those things that like you've got to figure it out. Like you've got to figure out how you can. Like I get like if you have to or if you don't have residual income
Yep.
and you don't have a way in which you can sustain and you have to work somewhere, then and you know that your passion and love and everything is going to be fixated on this product and business that you want to grow, then do a job that is mindless. Figure out a job that is mindless because what you don't want to do is you do not want to have a job that's going to require your undivided attention
Yeah.
because there's a biblical philosophy that says you can't serve two masters, and
Yep.
like if your heart and passion is over here on what you want to create, then have a secondary or have your it's really your primary job because what you love is your secondary, but what
Yeah.
your primary job just needs to be something that's thoughtless. Like maybe that means being a bartender.
Yeah.
Maybe that means, delivering food. Maybe that means, like working at Amazon and warehouse and you're just shifting boxes. Like allow yourself, like if you can work for a job like at a warehouse, right, that you can be educating yourself, like listening to audiobook if they allow you, and you're educating yourself while getting paid, that makes you that much better for that when you have that part time to go and crush it on your job or your passion.
Yeah.
Do that. Do that. Don't
Great.
yeah,
Yep.
don't put yourself in a bad spot. Like it's just you will regret it. There's
Yep.
no because the you can go and look at the staggering statistics that show that typical entrepreneurship businesses fail. They
Yep.
do. They fail. And if you're thinking you're going to raise capital, you're even in a worse position
Yeah.
because like if you think about a subset of 100 startup companies that start on January 1 of 2024. Okay, great. 100 companies just launched. Well, we know that only maybe 3 to maybe 6 of those companies will actually get any kind of VC backed funds. So
Yeah.
you have 94 companies that are going to get no funding, or you're going to ask mom and dad for money. You're going to burn their money. That's going to be
Hmm.
gone.
Yep.
And then the likelihood of any of those succeeding is like, man, what is it? 8% will succeed. And out
Yeah.
of the six people, let's just say six businesses got VC funding. Out of those six, 30% of them will succeed. Will
Yeah.
actually break even, maybe break even or make something of it. The other 70% are going to fail too. So just because you get VC money, you still stand a really good chance to fail. So my vision of success has always been very linear. Like it's over time. Like
Hmm.
don't ever judge someone's success because of, well, first of all, if you're a startup company and you're buying all the nice stuff and you have all the nice new cars and all that, and you don't have
Yeah.
you don't have residual income that can back it. I'll tell you a really funny story. You want to hear a funny story, Sean? I'll tell you a
Go
funny
for it,
story.
man.
I'm sitting on my porch. My wife and I, we have our dream home. We bought it 9 years ago. It was a
Sweet.
foreclosure. We built it
Yeah.
up and we live on, near the water. Like you can see the water from our house.
Love it.
And we love our house and it has everything you could want. And we I was sitting on the back porch and one of my investors is sitting back there with me and I'm building a detached pool house. And I remember the moment I'm sitting there and I'm looking at him and he looks at me, he goes, just out of curiosity, he goes, what did that cost you? And I said, that pool house is 50,000. And he
Yeah.
goes, oh, awesome. And then I looked at him and I was like, not your 50,000. Like that was because that investor invested 50,000 in our seed round. And it was like,
Yeah.
and I was like, holy crap. And I set up tranches of security. Like I've always been very transparent with our funds.
Yeah.
And
Good.
so people know, and they knew that they're investing in an entrepreneur who has proven success track
Yeah.
record. And
Yeah.
and so like that was, but it was a funny moment and it's true. And to your point, Sean, earlier, you were saying like, when you have to eat and you get, let's say you sell something that you make $5,000, right? And
Yeah.
you know that your company needs that 5,000 to survive, but you also know that you need to pay your rent, you need to pay, all these other things. Where's that money going to go? It's not going to go in the business.
Yeah.
It's going to go to your necessity. And then the company's dead anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You've
like,
killed the
yes,
goose that lays the golden egg.
exactly, exactly. So
Yeah.
figure out, so those who are wanting to start their companies, you got to figure it out. No one can figure it out for you. If you think that
Yeah.
there's going to be some kind of crystal ball, it doesn't exist. But the best thing you can do for yourself is figure out a way to be successful while, bootstrapping in many ways. It's okay to raise capital, but just understand when you start raising capital, who you're getting in bed with.
Yep.
You're getting in bed with a lot of investors. You may have to get away board seats, all these other things. And that's not always, okay, here's a paradox that you can think about, right? I am the CEO of Magazine Jukebox. My wife and I invented this. We are co-founders. We have a
Yeah.
third co-founder, Bronson, who's been on with us pretty early on. I would say probably in the first like 4 or 5 months that we came up with this idea.
Yeah.
But my wife and I, we invented this. We have blood, sweat, and tears in this thing. We have $300,000 of our own money. And
Yeah.
every time I raise big tranches of capital, which we're getting ready to go into our A round and we're going to raise 8.5 million. But every time you raise capital, you most likely are going to be giving away a board seat.
Yeah.
Think about this for a second. All of you thinking about starting a company, raising capital. The board seat has the right to fire me.
Yeah.
But like, think about
Yeah.
the 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 irony in that.
Yeah.
I invented this sucker with my wife. Like, we invented this. This is our baby. It got to here wherever it's
Yeah.
at. And just because these people had enough money to invest in the company, they have the right
That
to
power.
oust me.
Yeah.
Like, it blows my mind. Now, granted, I like to think I'm good enough that they'll keep, and I
Yeah.
think that, and you got to be very particular on who you bring on the board, but super important. But it's just crazy. And a lot of people have no clue on how any of that works. So, but I
100%.
say that all to
Yeah.
say that, here we are, we're live now, 2 years going into our third year of being live. And I say live, there's a difference between building and going live. Like live means it was open to the market.
Explain what Magazine Jukebox does now that it's live. What does live mean? Who is enjoying it? Who is paying for it and so forth?
Yeah.
Walk us through that with the business
Yeah,
model.
sure. So, um, so to understand that we are in over 1,000 plus locations now. We're in three different continents, four different
Mhm.
countries. We provide games, magazines, and trivia through the use of a QR code, text message, email integration, or even a third-party app integration.
Okay.
We are able to provide this without someone downloading an app or giving personal information. Now, if somebody wants to download a third-party app, we're just an add-on for them. But for
Got
the
it.
most part, text messaging. So I'll walk you through a couple of scenarios. Go into a hospital, you're in the waiting room, you're with a family member, you can scan our code, you don't have to give any personal information, and you can start reading cover to cover magazines that typically stay behind paywalls. Then you can play games or do trivia. The idea is to help reduce perceived wait times and to elevate the customer experience. Now, think of those who are getting in the hospital that are getting transfusions or getting dialysis. They're there for hours, and
Yeah.
there's only so much you can scroll or any movie you can watch. And so by giving them good, solid content that they would not readily have
Yep.
just makes sense. And so, but we're even more than that. So Magazine Jukebox, what businesses have learned is that we're not just an entertainment vehicle. We're also a vehicle that helps distribute information. So I'll give you an example. If we were at a car dealership and a car dealership is
Mhm.
trying to get people to get quotes on their cars.
Yep.
Well, now with Magazine Jukebox, when they scan and they go into the rack, down at the bottom is a banner ad and it says, hey, click here to see what your car's value is. Or when they click on a magazine, it goes to a full page ad and they can put whatever they want in their information. Think of it on
Yeah.
on a base, like an Air Force base,
Yep.
that would bring us in. And so they may have a South Gate is shutting down next month. So they're going to be able to put in, hey, Southgate, be aware Southgate's going to be shut down for the month of November,
Yep.
like maintenance or whatever. So the idea is that it's a way to get out information. You could also put on surveys on there. You could also put one-click Google reviews on there, so that way we can help drive traffic. So businesses, hospitals, laundromats, car dealerships, cafes, gyms, there's all kinds, like wherever there's a waiting space or wherever someone can be engaged in reading or entertaining on the phone, we're a perfect fit.
So it's the businesses that are subsidizing the the app. Is that correct?
So they pay for our services. Correct. So we
Got
use
it.
geofencing and time stamping. So
Yeah.
that QR code, like if someone wanted to take a picture of it and put it online on Reddit or something, it
Yeah, they
wouldn't
couldn't be
work. You
able
have
to.
to be
Yeah.
physically in that location. Now, once you scan it in that location, you can enjoy it for 36 hours once you leave. So you don't have
Got
to
it.
be in there to continue. And so we're courting with an airport so people can take it onto an
Oh, I was
airplane.
going to ask you
Yep.
if that
And
was one
so
of your next smart
Yep.
models. Good.
So airports, hospitals, laundromats, these are all like really big ones that are on our radars for sure.
What take us back to your initial customers. So you're going out and you're signing up these letters of intent with the NDAs and so forth based on your MVP. What was your sales approach to do that?
We talk about that often about carnal knowledge. Like, some people just have carnal knowledge. I've been doing sales for 20 something years. And
Yep.
so, you know, I don't I've always approached sales in a different way that I don't think sales should ever be force fed. I think all sales should be educational. So I think
Mhm.
if you educate the customer. So here at Magazine Jukebox, what we do is we actually start off with a discovery call. So and what the goal of that discovery call is to find out, where are their pain points at your
Yep.
facility, at the hospital, where are some of your pain points? Staffing issues, perceived time. I mean, there's all kinds of different issues.
Yeah.
So we identify the issues, we identify who the decision makers are, And then we set up a demo to demo it, and we curtail that demo specifically for them. Now, you're asking me though, if I had to go back in time, what was I showing them? Well, I was showing them my phone,
Yeah.
showing them what it could look like. I created some dummy, table tents. I used Fiverr to create
Yep.
some visual effects of it.
Yep.
I created a pitch deck that I knew had no clue on how to build. There's a lot
Yeah.
of things that I did that I'm not even sure I even know how to like carnal knowledge is important. And if you don't have that carnal knowledge, surround yourself with people that do. Like surround yourself with smart people.
Let me hit the pause button real quick to reinforce something. Those of you in our audience that are familiar with the systematic selling framework, what Scott is talking about, when he talked about discovery and the demo, discovery is system number 4, and then the demo is system number 5. And what I love about what Scott was doing there is a lot of companies flip that. They start with the demo, and it is so important to get that discovery so then you can tailor the demo to what is going to be most interesting and important to the customer. So Scott, I love what you did there. Now take us back to how you found those customers, those prospects, leads that would ultimately lead to your discovery. What was your process there that you thought, okay, these are folks that fit our ideal customer profile. Here's how I'm going to approach them. Did you cold call them, email them? How'd you approach them?
So a couple of things. One is I want to make sure I'm not taking credit. So I give credit to Chad. He's on our team, and Chad is actually who told us to, because we were actually going right to demo. And
Really?
that
Okay.
was
Yeah.
and it worked, and it worked in some aspects, but it did, because really the discovery call was just my carnal knowledge. There was no like
Sure.
actual discovery call. So I was
Yeah.
using that discovery call as I was using my carnal knowledge to create that discovery call. So it was not like planned. It wasn't planned. But Chad,
Which is normal as the
right.
founder to do it. But now
Yep.
now that Chad's on board, he's your VP of sales or head of
Yeah,
sales.
so he's our director of sales and
Okay.
marketing. And so he decided to implement a discovery call to demo
Good.
to close it. And
Yeah.
so we didn't, we just trust the process. You got to trust a lot of times of who you hire, and you got to believe in them. But at the same time, there's that old saying, trust but verify. So you
Yep.
got to. And my wife said it best, and I love this analogy, is that she said, we have to trust our team, but as the founders of our company, we have to keep our hand on the pulse.
Yep.
We've got to make sure the thing continues to breathe. And
Yeah.
so, and in
So well
business,
put.
if you're, yeah, and if in business, if you're not thriving, you're dying. And
Yeah.
that's just, if you're not selling, you're dying. Like that's but to answer your question, like from the very beginning, it was really like there's definitely cold calling was involved. Emails was my big one. So there's a website called Rocket Reach that you can subscribe to, and that helps you to unlock like people's emails so you
Mhm.
can figure out what their email is and reach out to them.
Yeah.
There's also, you can use, CRMs to help you. There's free ones out there. And then there's like Zoom info you can, buy, data from. There's all kinds of different options out there that you can buy from. But just be really careful, because they could also get really
Really
expensive really
expensive.
fast. And
Yeah.
if you don't know how to use them, you're burning money. So our first like year and a half, we were just burning tens of
Yeah.
thousands of dollars on these
Wow.
guys because we did
Yeah.
not know how to use them. And
Yeah.
so we were not using them effectively. And so, anyways, I share that. But yeah, I think for any startup is go to those places, and
Yeah.
if see who the buyer is, and if they're like, if it's a coffee shop that could be a potential buyer for you, go to the coffee shop, and talk to the owners, and talk to the main, the highest up you can get. That's who you want to talk to, because even if they're not right, they are the closest to the next step that you
Yeah.
can get to. And so, and then I read this book just recently called Never Finish by David Coggins. And fair warning, anybody who reads that book, it was hard for me to read because it's like every other word is a cuss word, like
Stay
every other
hard,
word.
man.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, every other
Big one.
word was a cuss word. And it was like he could be talking about lily pad and he'd be like, that mother bleep 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 lily pad. It's like that wasn't even necessary, but he did. So it was hard, but it's
Yeah.
just something wanted me to push through. And one of the biggest things I took from that book, and if you don't know who he is, go look him up. Trust me, the guy's list of accomplishments is
He
surreal.
is
Yeah.
literally audio adrenaline. Like if you just
Yes.
wanted to inject adrenaline into yourself, put your AirPods on and
Yep.
turn on David
That
Goggins.
1000%. So in the book though, he said where so many people fail is that they think 1 to 2 is as close as 99 to 100. And he
Mm.
goes, 99 to 100 is so far apart, so much
Mhm.
further than 1 to 2. And even though it's still one number off, they're just super far apart. And he
Yeah.
goes, and the reason he says you could be the 99%, or you can push yourself and be that one more percent to get to 100. He's like, but most people will never put in that extra 1% to get there. And so,
Is it because the feeling is so incremental because you don't get that like when you first start working out, you first start doing things, you get these jumps and gains, but it's like you feel like you're just you're rubbing against this grinder where it feels like every step you take is just hard to get to
yeah.
that next point. Is
So
that what he was saying?
in his analogy, yes, because his everything he does is very about being is about physicality. Like
Yeah,
everything's
yeah.
physical. I mean, the guy runs like freaking 400-mile marathons. Like it's
Nuts.
ridiculous. And so I think is it 140 mile, 400 mile? I don't know. There's a four in there, but
Yeah, yeah,
it's not 40. There's triple digits, whatever it is.
yeah.
But what I took from that was I was thinking about my insurance agencies, and growing from 0 to 1 million in ARR was easier than growing from 1 million to 2 million.
Really.
But growing from 8 or 9 million to 10 million, I didn't achieve it. Our agencies really capped out around 9 million.
Yeah, yeah.
And to understand, because so many other things come into play, the biggest thing you have to come into play is retention. And so if you don't factor in retention, like getting 0 to 1 million, you can grow that without, even if you lost a customer here and there, it doesn't really matter because
Because
you're selling so many.
you're in
Yeah, that it
flywheel
does. Yeah,
mode.
yeah, exactly. But when you get to 1 million though, and all of a sudden you have 30% falling off every year because people are going to do that in insurance. They're going to go to different policy. They're going to move, whatever.
Yeah,
When you have to replace 300,000 just to get to even,
yeah,
I mean, think about that, right? Like,
yeah,
like
yeah,
if it took me, let's use the easy number. Let's just say, 1.2 million, so $400,000 a year. If it took me three
yeah,
years to get to 1.2 million, 400,000, 400,000, 400,000, it was really more like four, let's say 500, 500, 500, right? Like I really sold 1.5 million over 3 years, but it fell down to
it
1.2,
netted
loss of
out.
300,
Yeah,
right? You get to 1.2 million though, and you're losing 300,000. Think about that. That means even if you sold at that same, now you got to, first of all, you got to hire more people, cost more money. So now
yeah,
you can't spend as much money on marketing because you're paying for more people. And so then you have to, if you were only selling 500,000 a year though, but now you're losing 300,000 out the back door, you're only growing now by 200,000. So you went from growing 1.2 million in 3 years to now it's going to take you 6 years to grow another 1.2 million.
yeah.
So it's like, so what you really have to do is you really have to start stacking your staff. You got to start stacking your marketing, but it's hard to do. So if you don't manage your funds right, then you're going to be in trouble. So that 99 to 100 is so far apart compared to the 1 to 2. Big difference.
As you explain that concept, how would how do you see yourself applying that with Magazine Jukebox? How is that changing the way that you're looking at growing this company compared to sort of that when you're hitting that wall with the agencies?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is out the gate, our whole premise is customer experience, like making sure the customer experience is as superior as it possibly can, making sure that our customers are taken care of, they're educated, they
Yeah.
are well versed on what the product can do for them. If they have problems, we're right there to answer them. We don't kick them down the road. We don't send them to some AI bot. We want to engage with them. We want to talk to them and we want to help them. And then sometimes that means you got to give a little too. So sometimes it means I've got to give up, maybe 2 months of service to keep them happy because they were
Yeah.
dissatisfied. We lost a very valuable customer in Australia because we messed up. And
Mm.
it was a good reminder of how important it is to maintain good relationships, and that customer experience has got to be spot on.
Is that part of now, as you're building out a sales team, is that part of your philosophy with your sales team that
Mhm.
they are building those relationships and they're being that firewall
Yeah.
to keep
So
things from expanding like that?
yes, so Lauren is our chief people officer,
Hmm.
and
Lawrence, your wife,
correct.
correct? Okay.
And so Lauren actually handles customer service and customer experience right now. Ultimately, our goal is to hand that to someone else to come in and manage. But right now,
Hmm.
it's we like I told her this the other day. I was like, you have no idea how much stress that takes off my shoulders that I know the
Yeah,
person taking care of the customer is in lockstep with me every step of the way.
absolutely.
I know what you know what I know, and we both have our talents. And my wife's talent is making sure the customer is taken care of.
Yeah.
And so making sure people are taken care of. And so just in general. So for us, it was like, man, this is um, this is just a no-brainer. So we have her in that position, and
Hmm.
she'll continue to create, we call them, they're called something. Anyways, our COO Bronson, he manages them. And it's
Yeah.
like basically our go-to directory on how processes are done. Best advice I ever received was on a book that I read called How I Built a $37 million agency in 7 years. I
Yeah.
forget the author's name, but he said
Okay.
in there, he goes, people will fail you, but systems and processes won't. And he said, so anytime a person fails you, you
100%.
remove them and you bring the new person in, but the system and process is in line. So
Yeah.
that just all they have to do is learn the system and process and keep going. So
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah,
kind
man.
of building that as a founder, you're building the plane in the air. So you're kind of figuring things out. So
You are, but as you said, it's so important to have those systems and processes in place
right.
because that's what brings the predictability, consistency, and it allows you when you do notice issues going on, you go, okay, let's take a look at the system, and then you can change the system, and
Yep.
now you have a more permanent fix. I love that. As we're closing out today, I had a question on the personal side, and feel free to share or not share as you feel comfortable. But I grew up in an entrepreneurial family where my mom and dad, when they worked together, they were unstoppable and built one of the largest community newspapers in the country back in Houston, sold it in 1977. And that's why we lived in Honolulu, Hawaii, because they sold it, retired, invested all that money in real estate. So when they were working together. My dad was an engineer at MIT, so he had that kind of, I guess that's the left side of the brain. My mom was a English lit major, writes super creative together. They were awesome, but their marriage just completely crumbled. They their Achilles heel is despite the fact that talent wise they can mesh together, marriage wise, they had a hard time working together. You and your wife have worked together now for quite a while. How have you guys worked through that type of dynamic where you can, uh, where you can kind of shut off other things that may create conflict, but be able to work together. How do you do that? Do you feel comfortable talking about that?
Well, actually, yes, I feel very comfortable talking about it because my wife and I talk about it quite often
Yeah,
to other people all the time. And in fact, we plan to write a book, and the book is
good for
going to
you.
be about working together and being married and staying in love and making sure that the marriage is the primary focus. So there's a lot of it's multifaceted. So I'll try to sum this up best I can.
Yeah.
First of all, you have to be able to identify what is your true north. So
Mhm.
ours is our faith in God, so that always maintains our true north. And we know that although we will fail, although we will make mistakes, that we have to, if we're going to fall, we're going to fall forward. So we've got to
Yeah.
continue heading towards God. The second thing is understanding that when it's okay to walk away from a disagreement. So and being respectful in that, right?
Yeah.
So like if her and I are arguing about something, which is and I mean this completely. I'm very fortunate. So I'm not going to sugarcoat that I have it. I'm equally yoked to a lot of people because I can't say that I am in the sense that my wife and I have had an honest, all out argument
Yeah.
we've been together for 13 years, 12, 13, something like that. And out of all those years, I can
Yeah.
honestly say large arguments. First of all, divorce is never mentioned. Divorce is never
Yeah.
an option.
Yeah.
That it's just simply not mentioned. Now we'll joke about like her. I'll say, I said, "Are you leaving me yet? Like, have I
Yeah.
done something? Like."
Yeah.
And she'll say like the way that you're leaving is going to be at the bottom of the pool, so I can collect on life insurance. Like, those are they. But like the we like when I'm heated enough, then I'll look at her and say, "Hey, I've got to cool off."
Good for you. Yeah.
So I am going to go and cool off, but I am going to be back in 1 hour. And this is exactly where I'm going to cool off. It could be something like going up to the frog. It could be taking a car ride, with the convertible. It could be going for a jog around the neighborhood. Whatever it is, she knows exactly where I am, and she knows exactly when I'm going to be back.
Yeah.
I'm not going to leave her questioning, wondering what I'm doing, where I'm going, who I'm talking to. And I think that's so critically important because you have to respect one another. Now, the good news is, honestly, I think that's happened twice that we've
Yeah.
had to do that. And it's usually it's got to be on like the stupidest stuff because I couldn't even tell you what they were.
Of
The
course.
other best advice I ever learned was from Dr. Phil, believe it or not. This is crazy. So I don't even watch Dr. Phil, but I respect him, but I don't even watch him.
Yeah.
And I watched this clip. Somehow I was on this thing and I watched this clip. And he said, when you are mad at your spouse, husband to wife, wife to husband,
Yeah.
when you're mad at them, don't you dare go to your own family to vent. You go to their family and vent. And here's why. They're going to continue to love their daughter, their friend, their
Yeah.
sister. They're going to love her because that's who she is and they've known her their whole life.
Yeah.
My family, my wife can go to my family, although not recommended. My family's kind of wacky, but
Yeah.
but like in fact, it was joking like early on in our marriage. I was like, you can go to your parents. I trust them. It's fine. But like because I true honestly believe that they
Yeah.
love me no matter what mistakes I could potentially make, that they would
Yeah.
love me through it. But you go to your spouse's family or friends and you lay it on them about your frustrations with your spouse, not your own. Because if you go to your own, they're going to love you and they're going to build up a resistance or
Yeah.
or a frustration or anger towards
Yeah.
that person. And that will create a tension in the marriage that is not good. Because like, oh, you're just going to go see your mom because you're going to complain about me, or oh, you're going to go see your friend. You're just going to, and so they're going to look at me poorly. That's a horrible mindset. And that
Yeah.
you don't want that. I want every time I go to see my family or my friends that none of them know anything
Yeah.
about the argument that I had unless she chose to tell them because they're
100%.
going to love me through it.
Yep.
So those are a couple of the argument key points. They from a business perspective, stay in your lane. Stay in your
Mm.
lane.
Yeah.
Like my wife is really good at customer service and retention. I don't dare go there. I may throw some suggestions out there, but she has the final say on that. I'm not going to try to cross over that lane. Now, she also knows not to come into my lane in sales. She
Yeah.
doesn't come over this lane. She doesn't come over to me in raising capital and who to talk to and where to raise capital at and all that stuff. She doesn't come over to that lane.
Yeah.
And because we stay in each other's lane or out of each other's lane, we actually have things to talk about at the end of the day too. Because
That's great.
you work together, you I remember like there's been days where I go home and she'll be like, "Why aren't you talking to me?" I'm like, "Well, you were with me all day. I have nothing new to talk about. Like I've got nothing." And
Yeah.
she'll be like, fair enough, I'm gonna go do this, whatever. So it's like, but and it's like, and you never go to bed without saying I love you, no matter what. Last night was really funny though. Our 3 year old, soon to be 3 year old, he woke up right when we were hitting, like it was like head hits pillow, boom,
Yeah.
child's awake. So I just went and scooped him up. I put him in our bed, and I'm like, I'm not even fighting this tonight. I got it. I was like, I got to get up at 5 in the morning and go to the gym. And so he's in her bed, and then we didn't say I love each other to each other yet because we were just getting in bed, and normally that's where we'll say, okay, I love you. Can I. And so then Lauren says to me, she goes, love you. And I said back to her and I go, love you. And then my little soon, 2.5 year old, whatever, he kind of leans into my ear and he goes, love you, Dad. And it was like
Love it.
I was like, that's then we just start like Lauren and I just start
Yeah.
laughing. Like we just couldn't stop laughing. So anyways, and you gotta have fun. Like you gotta have fun. Like my wife the other day, I ordered this shirt and it specifically says oversized shirt. And she's like, this is a really big shirt. Why did you order this? And I was like, well, it said oversized. I was thinking like you can wear it for like pajamas or something. It's just a nice shirt. And I was like, try it on. She's like, I'm wearing a like some sweater. I was like, yeah, try it on. And she puts it on, and I just lost it. I just started laughing, and I was like, what were we thinking we would achieve by you putting that on over a sweatshirt and looking like it just looked so goofy? I was like, what were we trying to achieve here? So yeah. Anyways,
So
so yeah, you gotta have
keeping
fun. You gotta have fun.
everything fun. As
Yeah.
we close out, anything that we haven't talked about today, and we talked about a wide range of topics, but anything that we haven't talked about today that you think would be important for founders and sales leaders to be thinking about?
No, I think we covered a lot. I would just say super important to surround yourself with smarter people. It's
Mm.
okay. You don't need to be the smartest person at the table. In fact, I hate being anywhere remotely smart at the table. So I prefer, and keep in mind, I'm uneducated, so it works out pretty good. Makes it easy for me. But so I surround myself, I recently got the privilege to see Ed Milet speak
Mm.
at an event. And if you don't know who he is, he's like this stealth buku billion like millionaire. I think he's worth like 450 million.
Yeah.
And he wrote quite a few books. But one of the things he said, and it finally resonated with me, and he goes, I'm not that smart. He goes, in fact, we do a trivia thing, who's the smartest in the family every Christmas, and I always lose. He's like, I
Yeah.
never win. He goes, I even studied for like 6 months coming into it. I was going to win, and I still lost to my family.
Yeah.
He said, so my superpowers are two things. He said, superpower one is he can read people really quickly.
Yeah.
And the second thing is that he can get people to surround him that are really, really smart. And I remember my wife and I were in the same conference, and I looked at her and I was like, that's mine. Like I never
That's
recognized
it.
those as superpower, and that's my superpower. And so I would say know your strengths, know your weaknesses,
Mm.
surround yourself with your weaknesses, that are strong in those weaknesses,
Yeah.
and be kind, love one another, care for other people, it makes no sense to make it to the top by yourself. Bring people with you because if you go by yourself, it's lonely, and it's okay to fail. Failing is learning. So fail as often as you possibly can.
Yeah. Scott,
So,
so honored that you would be so generous with us today with your time. Really appreciate you coming on the
yeah,
pod.
no pleasure. Appreciate you inviting me, and look forward to seeing many of your shows to come.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Appreciate it.